Good afternoon and welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, March 11th, 2024. I will call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. First item on the agenda, land acknowledgement. The town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot peoples of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot peoples past, present, and future while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Second item on the agenda, under agenda item 1.2, is conflict of interest declaration, pecuniary and non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this afternoon? None declared, thank you. Oh. Deputy Mayor Saylor.
I have a non-pecuniary one. My sister owns the business next door to the proposed cannabis store. So I have a, what number is that?
Non-pecuniary.
Yeah, for, oh, what number was it? 7.1, yeah, 7.1, thanks.
Thank you. Just to be clear then, non-pecuniary, you don't need to abstain, or you plan on abstaining?
I don't plan on abstaining.
Your mic was off. If you could say that again, please.
There we go. I plan on staying for the vote.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2.1, the regular council meeting agenda for March the 11th, 2024. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the regular council meeting agenda for March the 11th, 2024 as presented? Councillor Pickering. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3.1, adoption of the previous minutes. In your agenda package, we had the regular council meeting minutes from February 20th, 2024. Were there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Under the minutes of 7.1 under bylaws and policies, a rezoning bylaw for first reading, it says that it was carried unanimously. So there was two that voted against the motion.
Thank you. We'll make those corrections. On that particular motion, Councillor Abrey and Councillor Chapman was against the motion. Any other errors or omissions? See none, could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the regular council meeting minutes from February 20th, 2024 as presented? As amended, sorry. Councillor Chapman makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3.2, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes from March the 4th, 2024. Were there any errors or omissions in those minutes? See none, could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes from March 4th, 2024 as presented? Councillor Reese makes that motion. Any further discussion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So at 5:05, we have a public hearing coming up. And if I could get Cameron Mills, our Director of Growth and Investment and Deputy CAO, to make his way over to the presentation table. You want to stay there? Okay. So once again, we have a public hearing with taking place regarding agenda item 5.1, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 885-P-02-24. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:05 p.m. My name is Jack Van Rijn, and I will be chairing this public hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through myself. Addressed to the chair will be Mayor Van Rijn, and the purpose of this public hearing is to consider Land Use Bylaw Amendment 885-P-02-24. The public hearing procedures are as follows. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is the subject of this hearing. This is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Everyone wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter as called upon myself as the chair. Each presenter must state his or her full name, their address, and their interest in this matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given the opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a suggested 5-minute time limit on their presentation and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points raised by previous speakers if possible. If new presentation materials are provided, you may be required to email a copy to our municipal clerk. At this time, I would ask Cameron Mills, our Director of Growth and Investment, and our Deputy CAO to introduce the subject matter of this public hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Prepared a PowerPoint presentation which provides fundamentally for the viewing public the information that was found in the report presented to Council, provides also some additional information which might be pertinent to Council's decision on the matter. Lana, if you could pull the report up. Sorry, if you could pull up the PowerPoint presentation, please. Oh. My apologies. I sent you the wrong document there. I've got it in my email here, though.
While Cameron is preparing, for anybody that plans on speaking, our municipal clerk mentioned the microphone already. Make sure that you pull that close so that our viewers at home can hear.
Have you received it, Lana? Yeah, okay, great, thanks. My apologies for the error. Thank you, Lana. So, as mentioned, we're here today to discuss the land use bylaw rezoning application known as Bylaw 885P02-24. A few notes, first of all, on the objective of the presentation. First, as mentioned, the town of Coaldale is in receipt of a rezoning application for a portion of Plan 0913811, Block 2, Lot 72, and that is from a commercial C2 district to direct control DC. Current regulations in the town of Coaldale land use bylaw require rezoning in order to approve the proposed use, which is a cannabis retail facility. There have been 3 applications to date, inclusive of this one, for cannabis retail sales in Coaldale since legalization of cannabis occurred in October of 2018. The first was approved in April of 2021 at 1908 18th Street, which is Boxcar Bud Supply. And another was refused at first reading for 1604 20th Avenue, which is on the commercial lands west of the Campbell Clinic, which remain undeveloped at this point. And that was approximately a month or 2 after the first application was approved back in 2021. Tonight is the public hearing portion of the bylaw, and so the applicant has a chance to address council directly, as does the landowner and anyone else who feels impacted by the application. We've also had a chance to circulate the application, and we've received some feedback from the community. Much of that has been included in the agenda package to date, and anything received after that was sent out is simply presented as part of the public hearing portion of this evening, and council, you've been provided with those documents before you as well, though I will present them for the public. To speak to the location, as council is aware, the application is for the building, which currently includes KFC, Chopped Leaf, and Bar Burrito. Do I have a presenter? No, that's fine. So the facility, proposed space is located there, as shown in the picture, between the location of Bar Burrito and Chopped Leaf, represents approximately 1,100 square feet of space. The applicant is interested in entering into a long-term lease of the space, which would include tenant improvements to reconfigure the space as a cannabis retail store. Should rezoning be approved as presented, the applicant would go through a development permit approval process, which would include requirements for signage, et cetera, as well as meeting the substantial requirements of the province's regulatory licensing framework. Key considerations that council should consider in guiding their decision on the matter. First, cannabis retail sales is a regulated use in the town of Coaldale land use bylaw. It's not expressly prohibited, but significant barriers do exist for this type of use relative to other uses. Second, there's a schedule in the land use bylaw, Schedule 14, which guides town decision-making on the issue. As a direct control requirement is in place, there are measurable standards for separation which are applied, and these measurements are based fundamentally on public health measures as suggested by Alberta Health Services during the period leading up to legalization. Council will likely recall that these measures are substantially more restrictive than what was set out by Municipal Affairs as guidance for regulating this type of use, and that generally Council opted to implement the more restrictive measures at the time the regulations were adopted on the grounds that a cautious approach to legalization, given lack of certainty as to what that would ultimately look like, was appropriate. Third, the regulations provide for 3 distinct buffer zones. Council has the authority to waive or modify those setbacks at their discretion, but this fundamentally forms the basis of the application, as it is up to council to decide if such a waiver is warranted. The setbacks listed in the bylaw are as follows. First, 500 meters from another cannabis retail sales location. Second, 300 meters from a school, childcare facility, recreation facility, such as an arena, etc. Third, 100 meters from a provincial medical facility, which is to say a hospital. Fourth, 100 meters from a liquor store. And fifth, 100 meters from a public park. Staff notes that the proposed location is not in compliance with all of these restrictions. The application meets requirements 1, 2, 3, and 5, but requires a waiver relative to condition 4, which is the setback from the liquor store. For clarity, the proposed location is approximately 40 meters from a liquor store, which is to the north of the facility across 21st Avenue. Also, at first reading, a question was raised about the separation distance between the site and Kate Andrews School. Administration has taken the opportunity to measure the distance within the town's geographic information system, and that measurement indicates approximately 680 meters of separation using an sort of as the crow flies measurement, with a more significant separation if consideration is provided for physical travel distance. Regardless, administration notes that this is in excess of the 300-meter separation distance noted in the bylaw. Some additional context, which I think is important for council's consideration, is to consider the substantial public engagement that the town engaged in with the community in the creation of these regulations, and so provides council with some information therein. It has been 5 years. We note that it's been 5 years since these rules were adopted, and that the impact of cannabis legalization has become more clear. But we also note that there's tremendous value in considering the data that was gathered when regulation was first established. First of all, a summary of the input was that fundamentally that the community was deeply divided on the broader issue of cannabis legalization, and that issues like where retail stores should be located stemming from that legalization. The survey was broadly circulated and in fact represents amongst the most robust responses the town has ever received in terms of public input in recent years. And I thought it would be appropriate to highlight some of the key items from that input again tonight. So first, with respect to the question of general attitudes in the town towards legalization of cannabis, the town was split quite remarkably evenly in terms of both strong support for and against legalization, with strong opinions opposed to legalization at 276 people and 266 being strongly in favor of legalization. So statistically a very close number with 900 people responding. Similarly, in the somewhat opposed and somewhat in favor categories, a separation of only 2 people there with 119 and 117, and 8% of the population having no opinion. With respect to some of the more specific questions in terms of where in town would be most appropriate for this type of use, which is to say a cannabis retail sales use, public feedback showed a preference for downtown areas, with the industrial park being the second choice among the general public. Most municipalities have focused on standard commercial areas as being the best location for these types of uses. And feedback we received during this process from the RCMP indicated, in fact, a preference to avoid industrial areas due to low traffic volumes and higher potential for break-ins. Looking at the same question rather than from a part of town perspective, but from a zoning perspective, commercial C1, which is generally the zoning applied for the downtown commercial areas, was indicated as the preference, with direct control being the second option. And ultimately, direct control was chosen as the appropriate use in Coaldale's case. Now, this is a somewhat more technical question than the question of location, as the difference between one zoning and another, or the difference between direct control zoning and other zonings, is not necessarily perfectly understood by the general public, but the feedback is noted as being important for our consideration. And just taking a look at one more, in terms of public opinion on setback restrictions, well, the most common opinion was that the 100-meter setback provided by Municipal Affairs was appropriate. Just over half of the respondents in total indicated that the requirement was either somewhat or substantially too lenient. So when I speak to that, what I mean is the baseline regulation municipalities is 100-meter setback distance for cannabis retail sales stores from schools and from hospitals, and only those 2 uses. So the question had to do with that. In terms of types of setbacks that should be in place, public opinion indicated schools, childcare facilities, parks, and libraries were the areas of highest concern, with a substantial drop-off from there, with liquor stores and other cannabis facilities both being below 25% support. With respect to some of the other feedback that we received, the separation distance between cannabis retail facilities was identified as the most important setback restriction to consider from the technical experts speaking to the matter from a public health perspective, so the correspondence we received during this time from Alberta Health Services. This is a slide actually taken from the discussion about the setup of the initial store. So this is with respect to consideration for boxcar bud supply. Ultimately, this was taking a look at the various setback requirements for the various types of buffers required, taking a look relative to the downtown area, noting that direct application of the regulation to generally the downtown of Coaldale provides for the map, and that based on the calculation, there are fundamentally two locations that meet this strict application of the regulations. The first is the overflow parking lot currently owned by the town to the north of the old town office, and the second is the area north of Custom Auto and directly adjacent to the Campbell Clinic. However, since the establishment of boxcar bud supply, that would no longer be the case, as both of those sites would be within the 500-meter setback requirement from that location. Just speaking to the bylaw itself, and I'm sorry, this says commercial C1, it should include C2. It provides for all of the uses of the commercial C2 zoning. The purpose of that is that if the use is in place and then later shifts and decides to, say, open a pizza restaurant, it avoids the need to come back to rezone in order to convert to that type of use. So it would simply need to meet the requirements. It saves a step for a future applicant, saves time and money to provide for that sort of thing. It also provides for staff to make a determination on the development permit for the application, given that the use itself has fundamentally been approved if in fact rezoning is granted. Again, this is about focusing on being cheaper, faster, more efficient than requiring a second presentation to council to cover what is largely the same issue. Third, the rezoning applies only to the existing vacant bay within the existing structure. So this would not allow for expansion of the business within the building in the event an adjacent bay became available, nor would a second shop be allowed to locate within the premises, though clearly that would also struggle with that 500-meter setback. Public input on this matter. So included in council's report is correspondence received from residents concerning the application. Given their inclusion in council's agenda package, they won't be presented by staff. However, we recognize their inclusion in council's decision-making process, and administration is happy to speak to the content of that correspondence should council so desire. Administration also notes that some commentary was provided in the report on the content of those letters where deemed appropriate to provide planning and administrative context to some of the statements included in the correspondence where administration deemed appropriate to do so. Administration is happy to speak further on that, again, should council require it. Additional correspondence has since been received. Council has been provided with those letters. One additional letter was received from a resident of the waterfront community who's opposed to the application. And for anyone watching at home or in the gallery, I'll read that letter at this time. Coaldale Town Council, I'm writing to strongly oppose the proposal for another cannabis retail store in our municipality, particularly in the busiest part of town and directly behind residential neighborhoods. It seems like Lethbridge has allowed cannabis retail stores on every street, and I hope our town will not end up the same. As a resident, I'm deeply concerned about the potential negative impact of such establishments on our community. I have 2 young children, and I live directly behind the proposed location. I strongly disagree that a cannabis retail store belongs in a residential neighborhood in the busiest part of town in Coaldale. While I understand the economic considerations, I believe it's essential to prioritize the well-being and interest of our residents. Allowing another cannabis retail store in this area could detract from the overall quality of life in our town. Therefore, I urge the town council to carefully consider our concerns and reject the proposal for another cannabis retail store. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The town was also provided with 2 letters of support for the application, one from Sparwood and District Chamber of Commerce and another from the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. These letters read as follows, and these letters were provided by the applicant who operates similar facilities in these locations. From the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, they write, to whom it may concern, regarding the Source Cannabis. I'm writing to express support for Source Cannabis and its continued presence and contribution to our business community in the region. At the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, we prioritize sustainable economic growth and the promotion of innovative and inclusive business practices. Since joining our chamber in 20 2019, the Source Cannabis has demonstrated these values through its dedication to fostering positive relationships and investing in our local community, our local economy. The Source Cannabis's commitment to keeping more money and services within the communities they serve is commendable. By prioritizing local partnerships and engaging with the broader business community, they've demonstrated a genuine desire to contribute to the well-being and prosperity of our region. Their efforts align with the Chamber of Commerce's mission to support businesses that prioritize community impact and sustainability. We understand that cannabis is still sometimes a challenging topic. However, the Source Cannabis has approached the issue with transparency, responsibility, and a focus on education. By promoting responsible consumption and adhering to all relevant regulations, they've helped destigmatize cannabis within our community and have fostered constructive dialogue around the topic. Sincerely, Cindy Bester, Master of Education, Chief Executive Officer. Second, from the Sparwood and District Chamber of Commerce, to whom it may concern, as a Chamber of Commerce, we strongly believe in economical, sustainable, innovative, and inclusive business models, and Elk Valley Cannabis meets and succeeds these values with the District of Sparwood and the Elk Valley. We would like to acknowledge that Elk Valley Cannabis is a great addition to Sparwood and the Elk Valley. Since they have opened their doors, they have been consistently involved not only with the Chamber of Commerce, but the town as a whole. We believe that the economic benefit of having Elk Valley Cannabis has been substantial in keeping business and money in Sparwood, and they've been a great addition to our town. And that's from Nicole Latka, who's the Executive Director of the Sparwood Chamber of Commerce. So that concludes administration's presentation on the matter. We're happy to address questions from council now or throughout the public hearing as council sees fit.
Thank you, Cameron. You may have mentioned this in your opening dialogue. You said there was 2 applications. The second one that was refused at 1604 20th Avenue. What was the reason for the refusal?
So with rezoning applications are a little bit different than development applications. So we don't attach directly a reason. So when we would refuse a development permit at the Municipal Planning Commission, for example, we provide clear written reasons associated with that decision. Because this is a bylaw, it's simply a yes or no question. However, I would suggest that a couple of issues were raised. I would suggest that most prominently from my perspective, the issue of the 500-meter setback from the previously approved use was probably the most strongly considered. There was also some consideration about whether or not the fire hall counted as a school. And if the fire hall is considered a school, given that some classes are taught there, it would also impact that 300-meter setback variance based on that location as well.
And the Campbell Clinic didn't play any part of that?
As I recall, the Campbell Clinic was opposed to the matter, but it's been a few years, so I would have a hard time recalling correctly.
I'll open it up to members of council. Any questions, comments with Cameron Mills' presentation? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to Cameron, thank you for your presentation. A couple questions here. Since the only violation of this application runs in with the liquor store 41 meters away, have we had any voice of opposition coming from the liquor store?
Thank you for the question. No, we have not. The owner of the liquor store did contact me just to inquire about the issue, but didn't provide any feedback in favor or opposed to the application. And I'll also note for circulation purposes, we did also include circulation directly to the business owners. So for the managers of KFC, Barburrito, and Chopleaf, just because they wouldn't, given that they're not owners of the building, they wouldn't receive this correspondence, but we wanted to make sure that they were aware of the subject, but we did not receive correspondence from any of those parties as well.
Okay. Follow up to that if I could. So I did a little of my own measuring, just for my own curiosity's sake. So it looks like 500 meters from the current location, a boxcar would take us, if we headed west to Prairie Sky, 500 meters of the location of Barburrito, or in that Barburrito building, takes us to about the denture clinic. That pretty much wipes out potential for any other cannabis outlet in Coaldale, if I'm correct.
Thank you for the question. So it's a difficult question to answer. The regulations provide for these setback requirements that are within the land use bylaw, but also within the land use bylaw, there are allowances for various parties to adjust or provide waivers to regulations. So at the staff level, my limit on a development permit is a 10% waiver regulation. Because of the direct control nature of this topic, council is afforded 100% waiver jurisdiction. So there is nowhere in town that is ever sort of, everyone who applies always has the opportunity to ask, right? But yes, it would make it, with that said, it would make it fundamentally it would fundamentally eliminate West Coaldale within that district. There is potentially commercial development on the east end of town, which would not have a 500-meter setback, but they would have setback concerns from other types of uses as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, comments from members of council? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, Mayor, and through to Cam. Thanks so much for your presentation. I felt it was very, very comprehensive and brought in a lot of points, including the survey results in 2018. And I think your reasons for the location on 1604 20th Avenue being denied even first reading at the time, and I could probably help explain that part, being that council was obviously in the day was very new to this topic of cannabis. The purpose of direct control was to allow council to understand the dynamics of this business and to ensure that that the public were afforded the ability to understand it as well. And with that, I think that the other purpose was mainly to ensure that not only that the success of the location be understood, but that I think at the time council wanted to ensure that these types of businesses, as they're coming up in Coaldale, were became supported by the community, and at that time there was a reluctance by the community to support this kind of those kinds of venues. So today we hear a bit of a different story, and with the application proposal coming forward, I guess my question to you, Cam, is that if 75% of the or 80% of the application is approved, in the sense of that the setback requirements are approved, is administration offering the idea that moving forward that this could set precedents for other applications, whereby we could waive requirements as said, because we were already allowing these without 100% required setback. So I guess public opinion says that if the bylaw can't be served 100%, then why have the bylaw?
Councillor Chapman, was there a question in there?
That was the question. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I'll speak to the component on precedent, if you will. So administration's position with these matters is that there is no, this isn't a court of law. Precedent is not something which is sort of creates a binding situation for us as a town, either for council or for staff. Certainly, just in terms of the ease of doing business, administration's preference is to try to be reasonably consistent, certainly. But that's balanced with the fact that given that this is not, this is not a court, counselors are not, judges with 30 years legal experience, you're allowed to make a decision and then a year later decide, okay, maybe that wasn't I want to make the decision a little differently next time, right? And that's why, fundamentally, why precedent isn't sort of binding for these types of decisions. But to your point, as the representative of the town meeting with folks who are interested in investing in the community, it's certainly an easier position for myself to hold if I have an understanding of how decisions are going to be made moving forward, so that way I can guide people to spend their time focusing on things that have a reasonable chance of success. So from that perspective, we would view precedent as important, but really only from that perspective.
Thank you. I'll open it up one more time to members of council. Any more questions, concerns? Councillor Chapman.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mayor. My only question back to you, Cam, if I may, in a statement here on your report, my question to you would be: is this going to be a permitted use or discretionary use? Based on the sentence that if I could paraphrase it here, council should note that in an effort to minimize red tape, in line with the desired outcomes in the Town of Coaldale strategic plan, the proposed bylaw would designate approving authority to staff or authority to staff for permitted uses, as well as for cannabis retail sales, and would leave the authority for listed discretionary uses with council. Could you maybe help me out with that?
Absolutely. So the logic there is to say that, and for anyone listening at home, there's always two types of uses within zonings. There's permitted uses and discretionary uses. And there are a number of technical differences between those. But for an applicant's perspective, the biggest difference is who the decision maker is. So permitted use is a development permit that's issued by staff, typically myself or someone that works within my department. If someone wants to put a house on a residential lot, for example, that's usually permitted as long as it meets the setback requirements, what have you. A discretionary use is something for a standard zoning that has to go to the MPC. The reason this is worded this way is to say that given that we're looking at the use itself at the council chamber to date, we feel that if council approves the rezoning to direct control, then what they're telling staff is that they are comfortable with this use existing in this location. The reason we keep it as a discretionary use, though, that the one discretionary use in this particular zoning that staff is allowed to make a decision on, is that discretionary uses are something that we can apply when we're issuing a permit substantially more conditions to than for permitted use. So when something is a permitted use, there's very few conditions we can apply to the permit. But what we would want to do for this type of permit is make sure that there are strict conditions with respect to, say, adhering to the provincial licensing requirements for cannabis retail sales stores and other things like that. So it provides for a little bit tighter of a control, but still ensures that we don't have to come back to council a second round for example, to approve, the color of the paint on the building or the size of the sign, right? That's the logic, anyway, yeah.
One last time, any questions, comments? Seeing none, the applicant is with us here today. I would like to give the applicant a chance to come and sit at the presenting table, and the floor is yours when you're ready to speak.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor, for the time today to speak on behalf of The Source Cannabis. Just want to give a little insight about who we are as a company, what we've done since we've been in the cannabis game. I am one of the directors. My name is Ryan Swayze. I live at 26100 Red Cedar Drive, Sparwood, British Columbia. We are a family-owned business. It's my father and I. We're both directors of the company as well as owners. We started our first cannabis dispensary in Lethbridge in September of 2019. We have not changed locations. We've had no infractions. It's been nothing but great with the AGLC here in Lethbridge. Our second shop opened in July of 2021 in Sparwood, British Columbia, where I reside now, and I manage that shop as well as our shop in Elkford that we opened in October of 2022. We are starting to become a small chain. Wasn't our priority, but as we've kind of seen, the threshold amount of people that is needed for a shop is about 3,000. In the town of Coaldale has 6,000 plus. So we kind of see an opportunity to give to the community another shop and hopefully continue growing as a company. And that is all I have for council and you, Mayor, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. I'll open it up to members of council. Do we have any questions for our presenter? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to the presenter. Thank you, Ryan. Just a couple questions here. In terms of, I'm curious about the source's potential for community involvement and what that would look like. In Coaldale, we have usually all our businesses are community involved in one way or another. I'm not saying that's a requirement, but it definitely feeds my curiosity. For instance, would there be interest in the source joining the Chamber of Commerce? And then secondly, plans for signage, if you know that off the top of your head.
Thank you, Councillor Beekman. So with being a cannabis shop, it's kind of hard to be super involved with the community, with youth and whatnot and all the restrictions. So we do as much as we can. In the smaller communities, we can get more in British Columbia. So such things, we do lighting ceremony and we do hot chocolate and whatnot. We donate to the soccer tournament and the softball tournament every year for July 1st and such things like that. We are part of every chamber for every community that we are in. So Sparwood, Elkford, and Lethbridge. Our plan with signage is very similar to what we have in Lethbridge. It's all by the size, I believe, for the permit of how big your front of your space is. So we'll probably look to go 12 by 2 feet across the front of it because we have 18 feet across the front of our building.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions for our presenter? See none. Councillor Chapman has a question.
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Ryan, if I may, and thank you so much for considering Coaldale in your aspirations in business and commerce. My only question to you, if with your track record both in Lethbridge, Elkford, and Sparwood, youth are a big component of our community, as you may know, and of course with the new school coming up in proximity to the area. And I think a number of the community people are concerned about the amount of traffic that will be taking place starting this fall in this part of town, particularly around the Tim Hortons area, McDonald's, Bar Burrito, Kentucky Fried. How do you plan to ensure I guess we'll use the word safety of our youth today, and with the proximity or location of your business?
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. To answer that question, all our shops, all 3 of our shops have frosted windows, so no one can see in. There is light coming in to help, but there is no one allowed, or there's no view in, so you can't see any cannabis product, anything like that. Our signage is very subtle. We're the source cannabis. It's not a big cannabis leaf or anything like that. We're not out there. We're very sleek, and we try to make it a place where someone's mom who might not want to be seen or someone along that can go. And it's very sleek and smooth and not cannabis in your face type feeling, which some of our competitors have done in some of the bigger spots such as Calgary.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you all for your time.
I'll now open it up to anyone else that wishes to speak. My understanding is that we have Chase Bennett from Boxcar Bud Supply here this afternoon that wishes to speak. So Chase, if you want to take a seat, please. And Lana will just load up your presentation for you, and then you're good to go. And Chase, just for the public record, if you could say your name again and your address, please.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. My name is Chase Bennett. Our business address is 1908 18th Street in Coaldale. And then do you want my personal address as well? 2029 30A Avenue in Cottonwood in Coaldale as well. So I'll start this off. Thank you very much, Council, for hearing us out today in our position against this application. Again, my name is Chase Bennett from Boxcar Bud Supply, and I'm here with my two business partners, Blaine Emilson and Brad Howell, just kind of sitting beside me. So an overview. So what I'm going to speak about today, kind of give you just a basic breakdown, but why we're here today, application background, location background, supporting local location material, as well as proposed cannabis retail location, points to consider, final remarks, and conclusion. So I don't plan on taking a bunch of your time today, but I'm just going to lay out a couple points of where our position is for today. So to start this off, why are we here today? So our request today to council and town is simply be honorable and fair when accepting new business applications within the same industry within the town of Coaldale. So we're not asking the town council to be our gatekeeper for competition. We simply want an equal and fair playing field. And I'll go over how I get to that point. So our ask today, we're asking town council to not approve a variance to the current bylaw, allowing competing cannabis retail to obtain or to open adjacent to a liquor store, parks, school, and residential neighborhoods. And those are two details below as far as Highway C2 to direct control and the cannabis bylaw itself. So I'm going to take you back a little bit to our application. We actually were approved here in the town in April of 2021. So first of all, I'd like to thank town council for that process. It was not easy for us to get through. And specifically, I'd really like to thank Cameron Mills for that aspect and how he supported our application. We built a relationship with the town, and we were the first cannabis retail to be part of the town in general. So we opened that relationship and had some abilities to actually go together with it. So as far as our application itself was extremely difficult. This resulted in a partnership with the town to determine the best possible outcome for both parties under the current bylaw. We provided several references of who we are and how we conducted business. To give you examples of that, we had Clare's Hometown Council, Tabor Town Council, the RCMP of Pincher Creek, and the Mayor of Pincher Creek. We had to break the stigma of cannabis retail with council as well as the residents of Coaldale. Our business was not fully welcomed by all residents because of the negative connotation associated with cannabis, but by far the hardest or the biggest hurdle we had to come through was our location. We settled on a location that in terms of retail is less than desirable for business to thrive, but it suited the preferences of council and the residents in order for it to be accepted. Background. So a little bit more background on our actual location. So the disadvantages of Boxcar Bud Supply's accepted location. So number one, the build out. So I just heard today the actual application to be approved is just over 1,100 square feet. We renovated a 3-level restaurant in order to gain approval for the town. So it's a significant financial investment to do so. In addition to that, we are off the beaten path. So brick and mortar locations live and die from location. That's why McDonald's purposely builds locations on busy streets and intersections. And the McDonald's in Coaldale is no different. Poor visibility. The specific location of Boxcar Bus Supply was strictly accepted by the town due to limited visibility, lack of foot traffic, and lack of easy access to the main highway. Very little residential. Another determining factor for acceptance by the town with our current location of Boxcar is the proximity to residential. We are out of the way of all resident dwellings with the exception of one home. In addition to this, we spent over $10,000 on rooftop signage. So we are visible from the highway as well as visible to the residents of Coaldale. And in addition to that, 25 grand was spent on a Coaldale themed mural to bridge that aspect as well. This is a direct quote from our meeting from April 12th in support of the previous slide. It comes from that meeting and it says, it's difficult to conceptualize a location within downtown that has lower general exposure or less vehicular or pedestrian traffic than the proposed location. So again, one of the preferences from the town when we were going through this process and working with the development was we were out of the way and not in the viewpoint or the direct light of Coaldale. To give you guys an example and in comparison to between both locations, you'll see on the left-hand side that there's a pink star to where the proposed location is set to go. Next to that is Tim Hortons, and I imagine we could fill in McDonald's, Fast Gas is all in that area as well. You'll see around that location there is a pink square or overlay to where residential is directly affected by the location of the new proposed application. If you go to the right-hand side, you'll see us. There's a little location, a little circle, red circle, with our location right next to it, and there's a singular small red box as overlay of residential. That is the only single home that our location is close to. There's a dramatic difference between them both, as you guys can see. When looking at the next or the proposed location, there's a couple major points to consider. So first off, downtown and residential access. Cannabis retail is a stop and go business. Simply being on the access route to this mass of residential homes from Highway 3 is an obvious benefit. When we look at the locations or the supporting stores around the proposed application, being KFC, Chop Leaf, Bar Burrito, Fast Gas, Tim Hortons, McDonald's, the liquor store, these are all stop and go locations. They're about convenience. 4-lane access to Highway 3. So Transportation Canada reports this section of highway sees over 18,500 vehicles daily. In addition to that, access to mass residential. So part of the previous slide with the pink overlay for residential, the residents of Waterfront Harbor, Westgate Landing, Fairway Estates, and Cottonwood Estates use this road multiple times a day to gain access to Highway 3. Unless you're going back from the back Highway 18 or 812, you have to go this way. And obviously, Home Hardware, Home Hardware is the biggest box store in Coaldale, and this is the only access to get to it. When in comparison for applications in our location, again, this is from the regular council meeting, there were multiple locations available to lease during this process. However, these locations were deemed unviable by council due to liquor store step back with reference to being too visible. So to put it in perspective, the preference for us to be in the closet of Coaldale. This new application is basically going on the front door. We settled on our current location due to the direction of the town council based on the below excerpt. The site in question is on a one-way street. It does not connect to the highway and sees very little pedestrian or vehicular traffic other than those from people attending to access the businesses on that street. So the very aspect of how we were approved to where we were being as far as to where our location was actually situated was on the guise of it being tucked away. So we are basically going from a back street to Broadway. And it's the fundamental difference between the application that was proposed or in place to what is actually being situated for bylaw to restriction to be relaxed today. Points to consider. So part of the reasons why we opened and chose this municipality to be in is my young family lives in Coaldale. My children attend school in Coaldale. And we have set down roots to raise and grow our family in Coaldale. We are truly locally owned and operated. Our business and money generated stays in the town of Coaldale and it stays in our community. Our final remarks on the implications of approving this new application. If council grants the variance to this bylaw, they are contradicting the very intention of regulations that were originally put in place by the town for cannabis retail to gain approval. The following quote is again from that council meeting April 12th, and it's about 2 other locations that were possibly considered. There is an argument to me that while they meet the direct application of the regulations, they also aren't necessarily the best locations to meet the intention of the regulations in terms of their potential impacts to community public health. Council would be allowing an opportunity for a non-local retailer to have a significant competitive advantage over a local retailer who met every restriction presented to be hidden and out of plain sight from the community. Council would not be introducing a new cannabis retailer to Coaldale, but effectively amputating the locally owned and operated cannabis retailer who laid the foundation and trailblazed cannabis retail in the community. Conclusion. On the right-hand side, this is part of the Coaldale strategic plan, and one of the big points of that is relationships. So we bridged a relationship with the town of Coaldale when we first got approved for our application. We didn't just open up a retail store, we opened up an entire new industry to the town of Coaldale. From that point, or the strategic plan, it says, we recognize that strong relationships and meaningful dialogue are key to good governance and decision-making processes, and that the town is strengthened by working collaboratively with those we serve and partner with. So to give you an example, that's exactly what happened with our application, and that's exactly how instrumental Cameron Mills was during our application as well. So when speaking of relationships, we have built the foundation for cannabis retail in Coaldale and broke down barriers. We successfully worked with council and the residents to choose a location that made everyone the most comfortable due to the negative connotation associated with cannabis. We have been an exemplary member of the business community and have altered viewpoints surrounding cannabis. We trust that town council will continue to implement fair and honorable business opportunities within the community, and we'd like to thank you for our time to submit this as well.
Thank you. I'll open it up to members of council if they have any questions for our presenter. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, through the chase. So just to clarify this, what I'm hearing is if when you applied for this permit or this application, you basically would, the way I'm seeing it is where you are now was the only location that would fit in, and there was basically no other place in the town to go, the way town was looking at it, right?
To an extent, correct, but there was also a couple other locations that were within the liquor store setback that would have been far more favorable for us to do. When we contacted the development office and worked with council, it was basically on what was the best aspect for the town, and a big consideration point was us to be kind of out of the way, out of kind of like from plain sight, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, I think the this building in question didn't exist at the time, but I think the other strong position considered was likely the vacant bay on Main Street itself. And that was the logic there was to suggest at the time, given the stated preferences that we understood from the council of the day, that the applicant would have more success not being in a highly visible location, which would be directly on Main Street itself. So that would have been that conversation.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Chapman.
Great, thank you, Mayor, and through to Chase, welcome back again. It's been a while since we've chatted before, and I thank you so much again for bringing back some of the history and the storyline behind how you got to where you got. how you got there. And of course, as I said in my preamble earlier, is that obviously for our community of Coaldale, obviously these kinds of experiences are new and I'll use strange, simply because our community has not been felt about it in the past. But in the meantime, I think that now that you've been here for a few years, and I think the position of the direct control, as well as the understanding that in the future, if that building were to be reverted, it could revert back to its restaurant form, for which I believe some of the items are still located in that building. But my question to you, Chase, is this and that. You pointed out in your presentation about some of your other locations that you have, and I think in the spirit of free enterprise, Mayor, my question to you would be, with your experience in other communities, how has free enterprise worked for you there?
Can you rephrase the question, as in free enterprises?
So, my question, is this, you have experience with your enterprise in Pincher Creek, Tabor, Claresholm, and I believe another location, Fort McLeod. Mm-hmm. And how is that working for you there? Are there other shops there that are competing with you in terms of business?
Yeah, you betcha. So to give you guys some background information, the cannabis industry has been very volatile. It's not something that you come in and it was just an ATM walking through the door. What's happened is they have big business coming in, you have larger corporations, and they put prices down to the floor, kind of like the Walmart model, I'll say what it is, and then they raise prices when business or when town or different locations go out of business. So as far as where we're sitting in 2021, it was the worst year. 2022 second half was closely behind it. So it's been a struggle for us to kind of keep operating, and it hasn't been something that it's been a very easy road down. To give you an example of a competitor or what it looks like in a town. So Fort McLeod, we were the first one in there for about a year or so, a year and a half. We had a competitor come in shortly after that in a very similar location. So obviously you guys can think about Fort McLeod as there's 2 lanes on the highway, and then kind of the shops and shops and businesses are kind of in the middle, kind of between those 2 highways. So our location's very similar to the one that opened up, and we immediately lost almost 50% of our sales. We gained that back through price wars, price matching, better customer service. Like there's certain intangibles that you can control, but at the very least, you're going to take a 30 to 40% haircut just as there's a new location kind of coming in. So that's with an equal location. So if you look at the difference from Fort McLeod for our locations to where we're sitting here with Coaldale, we're employing kind of a David and Goliath scenario to what is available and what is about convenience. So if you think about what's going on, we played ball. We're more than happy about being in the community of Coaldale. But as far as what would potentially happen if they would open their doors, and it would be catastrophic for us, for sure it would be.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to Chase, thank you for your presentation. Yeah, thank you for your contributions to the town and being the first. I do remember 2021 when that happened. Now, we can't rewind the past and the hoops you had to jump through to do that. It's hard to talk about a level playing field when the field has changed so drastically in the last 2 years. So all things to be considered on our end. The one question I do have for you when you talk about location and visibility and whatnot, honest question, because I'm not a user of these facilities. So do you find a lot of your clientele are just passing by, or do you find a lot of them are just, they leave the house with the intention to go to the retailer? What I'm saying is it mainly like foot traffic that had no intention of going there, or do you usually leave with a pre-decided goal to visit the dispensary?
I would say there's basically kind of breaks down into 2 different types of customers. One customer is looking for price and or the type of flower, the quality of the product, so that it becomes the destination. those are significantly lower than convenience. So if you think about it, if I'm leaving the house, I'm gonna go get supper, I might get gas, McDonald's or Tim Hortons, whatever it is, and then my next stop is right there in that cannabis store. So to go out of the way or to go separate, to go all the way downtown, depending on where you live in Coaldale, I would say convenience is what rings true. If you think about retail and how retail, especially brick and mortar, works, it's the first three rules of retail is location, location, location. So it's very difficult for us to combat that type of aspect when they have that many amenities close by. Does that answer your question?
Yes, if I could follow up on that. So then I guess looking at things from a different point of view, and not saying you need to have the answer to this, but it's just kind of something I've wondered in my head. Rather than rejecting future business from coming to Coaldale, is there any way to make it more beneficial for you in your current location, or are you kind of stuck with your capabilities and your possibilities where you're at?
I'm glad you asked that question because I've been thinking about it for a while. So as far as that first slide where I said, like, we're not asking town council to be the gatekeepers for competition. We're not. The issue is, if we look at that location and where we've actually started up, we're going to be out of that location or we're dealing with a potential significant competitor in the inside of a lease. So we signed a 5-year term in that store or that location. We retrofitted in those terms. We've actually left open the kitchen to potentially if the family wanted to come back to run a restaurant. The reason why a good benefit was an added benefit to when we actually sected the application and it was approved that we could actually give Walter the chance to come back and open up that his restaurant if he wanted to. But as far as when you think about actually combating the competitor coming in, what we're basically asking is the chance to have a level playing field or a chance to actually have that outside of that lease agreement. So if competition is coming, maybe some time for the bylaws that are going to be changing on a set date, so we get time to adjust, or just the fact of where we probably ask council, it would probably move later down the road. But we're still locked into that lease for at least another two years.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open it up one more time. Anybody else? Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to Chase. So just for clarification, there is a chance you guys might relocate down the road?
It's obviously our preference not to. We've obviously looked at the building that we've done. Like, that's a lot of expense that we've dropped into that build out. Like, a big thing is that we're really proud about is that mural. As much as it kind of it's about Coaldale, it's Alberta Birds of Prey, as well as Coaldale's originally like a rail town for how we named our store. It's not necessarily if we wanted to; it's the aspect that we would have to. So it's at that portion of it when you're in a dogfight essentially, and something has a significant advantage in the market, we'd have to move. Thank you.
Thank you. Open it up one more time. I have a couple of questions and a comment here. So first of all, I was pleased to see the rezoning go through so you could open up Boxcar Bud Supply in Coaldale. And back in April 12th of 2021, when that was passed at a council meeting, the question I have for you, did you think at that time you would be the only cannabis shop in Coaldale?
Obviously not in perpetuity, but the conversations that we had around with council and development offices that we would have it for around 5 years, or at least the chance to be successful. I don't have that in writing for you today, but that's what we were told.
Okay, thank you. And then you started off your presentation with you don't want council to be the gatekeepers for your business, and I totally agree with you. So the question I have for you is that, if we're going to be talking about this later down on the agenda item, but a good example is the town of Coaldale has 4 liquor stores right now, and they're in the same competitive business that you are in. So if we have business owners coming to us and trying to explain why we should not allow another business to open up, that's where I have some concerns. The question I have for you is, was Coaldale the most difficult municipality to deal with back when you started this whole process?
I would say as far as wasn't the most difficult, but I would be in the top couple for sure.
So as Cameron Mills stated earlier, the provincial guidelines are 100 meters from hospital and schools. And as you mentioned too, for other cannabis shops, it's 500 meters, 300 meters from a school, 100 meters from a parcel of land which is provincially owned or operated as a medical facility, 100 meters from a boundary of land of which a liquor store is located, and 100 meters from a boundary or parcel designated as school reserve. So would it be safe to say then that those were the strictest guidelines that you had to face?
I would say one of three for sure.
Okay, thank you. And further to Councillor Beekman's comment where he did some measuring, as stated in the bylaw, you need to be 100 meters away from a liquor store. And I found it quite interesting that I went and did some measuring as well. And the distance from the Ventura liquor store to the front door of the front door boxcar Bud Supply is 68 meters. And to the back door of the Ventura liquor store is 58 meters. So I found that quite interesting as well, that you don't even qualify to be there in the first place based on the bylaws that the town passed in April of 2021. So the question I got for you is, other than the fact that you want council to turn down this application, is there any other reasons that you are interested in moving to another location in Coaldale that would suit you, or you just want to stay where you are now by yourself?
As far as I'll address the setback on the liquor store aspect, if you don't mind first, Mayor. So part of the reason to why we were allowed to do that is liquor and cannabis wasn't in the same viewpoint or viewable area from residentials or foot traffic. So as far as being on the main drag or main street of Coaldale would be a much better option. We'd actually been farther from a liquor store, depending where their first little bit was. But it was chosen that we were out of the way and pushed to the side, basically. As far as my intention or later on down the road is obviously we wouldn't want a competition coming in, but it's the details around how that competition comes in or the competitive advantage that they get. So what I mean by that is, I don't know if we're here today, if the job that we did or have done or the reputation and work that we've done in the community is if we had multiple people causing problems, there's litter everywhere, significant issues with cannabis or people loitering. But our operations have been exemplary within the community in those terms, and then that's where we build our systems on how we want to get to.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up one more time for questions, comments from council. See none? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll open it up to anybody else in the gallery that wants to come and speak. The applicant wants to have another opportunity. Whenever you're ready, Ryan, go ahead.
So I just have a quick question for Cameron. With the current store operating here, it was within the buffer zone of a liquor store. Were there any other buffer zones that it was within?
Yes, thank you. So it was within the buffer of a liquor store. It was also within the 300-meter buffer from John Davidson School. The exact distance of how far it is from John Davidson depends whether you're measuring, from the edge of the lot to the edge of the lot, or if you're measuring from door to door. So that was something that was considered significantly by the previous council. Part of the logic behind the location that was chosen, given that it is within that boundary, was the fact that the idea being that while it is less than 300 meters, it's also significantly out of the way from you've got to turn 3 times in that separation. So the thought process was perhaps less than 300 meters, but not in sort of a direct line where students would be walking, was kind of the spirit and intent behind that rule. And so I believe council felt that it was appropriate on that basis.
That is my only question.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Seeing none, I will now ask council if they have sufficient information to make a decision on Land Use Bylaw Amendment 885-P-02-24. Thank you. I will declare the public hearing closed at 6:14 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda is we have a delegation for the Seniors Advisory Committee, and we have Terralyn Craig that's going to be presenting. Terralyn, whenever you're ready, you can come up to the presenters table, and you just have to turn your microphone on and make sure you speak into the microphone, please.
First of all, I just want to ask you to excuse my appearance today, but I got the notice to come and speak when I was in Calgary, and I just now returned from Calgary, so sorry about that. Okay, so good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me this evening. For those who do not know me, my name is Terralyn Craig, and I am the president of the Coaldale Seniors Advisory Committee. The Coaldale Seniors Advisory Committee has been supporting seniors in our community since 2019. Our primary function is to get lonely and isolated seniors out of their homes and interacting with other seniors. We've had an amazing, hard-working board. In 2019, we composed and printed a handbook to assist seniors with government and local agencies. This year-long project resulted in a comprehensive directory for them. The Coaldale Community Grant assisted with printing costs, as well as the Coaldale Community Wellness Association grant. We also completed a senior survey to find out what their needs are in Coaldale. We began our coffee and cookie time. This monthly program allows for seniors to hear presentations on relevant topics to seniors, as well as a time to get to know new people. And we're happy that Mayor Van Rijn has been attending those. Our first two Seniors Week celebrations were canceled due to COVID, and COVID did put a hard stop to all of our activities for 2 years. 2024 will be our fourth consecutive year in designating a celebration of our seniors during Alberta Seniors Week. Over the years, we have had support from the town, CCWA, and numerous Coaldale businesses. Unfortunately, our board has dwindled to 4 members, and after advertising and actively searching, we cannot find replacements. So we have reluctantly decided to fold our group. FCSS will take over coffee and cookie time, and we hope that the town of Coaldale will take over Seniors Week celebrations. This year, we will be short $1,538.50 for Seniors Week, and are requesting these funds from the town, as we are also no longer under the charitable registration designation of the museum. We certainly hope you will assist us with this project this year and take over the project in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. So a couple of questions based on your budget that you presented. The entertainment that you plan on bringing in,
Yes.
can you explain a little bit about that entertainment and the price tag that you have listed here on it for $3,150?
Sure. I should mention too that last year, this year's entertainment is about $300 less than the entertainment we had last year as well. So, okay, so the group is called Double Vision, and they are a comedy and magic act out of Saskatchewan. They have performed all over the United States, all up the East Coast. They had performed in Las Vegas for a month-long stint there, and they have even performed for the Prime Minister of our, at the Prime Minister's residence. They're a lot of fun. They're twins, so they do play on that with their magic and their comedy. And it's a very clean show. It's very family orientated. And they are not charging us for their hotel stay, nor are they charging us for their mileage. So this is a reduced fee that they're giving us plus, and then plus the GST.
Thank you. And where would the venue be for this?
The venue this year will be at the Coaldale Senior Center.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to members of council for any questions for our presenter. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and nice to see you again, Terralyn. Welcome back to Coaldale. I wanted to ask my question to you with regards to your charitable status with the museum. Could you describe a little bit of how that was achieved to develop that together?
They were very, very generous. We requested that we go under their registered charity number. I believe they do the same thing for the Coaldale Senior Center. So we requested if they would allow us to do that too. It worked really well for fundraising, because when you can give a tax receipt for donations, obviously people are a lot more generous. So, Myrna Moulton is just getting a little up there in years now, and she finds it too laborious to separate the GST refund checks at the end of the year, and so has severed. Yeah, we no longer can use that number. Nor can I'm not sure about the senior center if they're still doing it.
Okay. Just a follow up. Being that I sit on the board of the FCSS, I think that the request for FCSS to take over the cookie time, is that what you're asking for?
Yes, they've already accepted that. They will be, they are prepared to do that beginning of September.
Okay, great.
And then for the town, for the Alberta Seniors Week celebrations, the first full week every June is designated as Seniors Week in Alberta. And we are hoping for 2025, well, first, if we could get a little bit of assistance this year, and for the town to take over starting 2025.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
And Carolyn, just a little bit of background too with the town. So the previous council term, there was a motion made to permanently declare Seniors Week each year, the first week of June. Oh. So that's already in place.
Awesome.
And I also had our municipal clerk reach out to the senior center here in Coaldale to see if they do anything. And the only information we got back was that they're going to host a dinner.
Yes.
And they have dinners where they invite members of council to for every holiday that comes up. So that will continue. So as far as Coaldale taking on anything to do with the seniors, we, like I said, we declare Seniors Week each year. As far as us physically doing anything different. That's something that we have to work with our community services, and obviously that's going to be a budget item as well. And the question I have for you is, why is the advisory committee separate from the senior center group? Like, there's two standalone organizations trying to do the same thing.
Well, we don't do the same thing. That is the whole thing. We provide, they have their agenda, and they provide, like, you know, small get-togethers and small luncheons and things like that, and games and whatnot. We had to look at a number of communities throughout Alberta, and we actually modeled our advisory committee after Medicine Hat, Red Deer, and Strathmore. They all had advisory committees with similar programs. And so we actually asked them if we could just steal all their ideas. And it is a totally different venue and an application to meet seniors' needs than the senior center. Like our coffee and cookie time, I mean, we do have our presenters coming in, and our seniors really love that. I mean, they get valuable information. And it gives a chance too for a lot of our local businesses to participate too, like our pharmacy, our the CCWA also presented to our group, and they made the seniors aware of how they can donate when a loved one passes to their grant fund and that. So it's totally different than what is offered at the senior center.
Thank you. And like you said, I've been to many, if not all of them, and you have good education pieces at them. So your ask from council today, and we're not going to give you an answer right now. You're looking for $1,538.50.
Correct.
Cover the shortfall.
Yes, I'm basing those figures on 70 people in attendance. Last year we had 55 people in attendance. This year we're also inviting the surrounding communities to attend as well, like Pitcher Butte, Colehurst, Raymond, all the outlying areas to attend as well. So we bumped it up by about 20 people or so.
And then is the date chosen now then?
Yes, June the 5th.
June the 5th.
Yes. And any money that we have left over in our account, which we don't assume will be too much, but if we do end up with more than 70 people, obviously we'll have a little bit more money in our account. Then that money will go back into the community, either to Connect's Kinsman, or we were also thinking of the high school football team.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up one last time to members of council. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll discuss it, and we'll be reaching out to you with our answer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
Say hi to Kim for us.
Oh, I will.
Could I get someone to make a motion that we receive the seniors advisory delegation as information? Councillor Chapman makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7.1, Land Use Rezoning Bylaw 885-P-02-24 regarding second and third reading. And again, we have Cameron Mills, our Director of Growth and Investment, and Deputy CAO presenting. Cameron, I'll let you close the loop on that discussion we had earlier.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So I don't have anything further to add at this point with respect to second and third reading. We presented the report as part of the public hearing. You'll note that administration provides no recommendation on this particular issue. We recognize that this is something that has strong opinions within the community on both sides. We also recognize there are reasonable arguments on both sides of the position. So kind of unusual for us. We usually like to narrow it down and provide a clear recommendation, but we simply don't have the opportunity to do so for this one. So,
Thank you. And one item that I would like to add too is that there was lots talked about during the public hearing, and there's also an opportunity if members of council want to digest this a little bit further, it can also be tabled. So I'll open it up to members of council for any discussion on the request for second and third reading regarding the rezoning bylaw for 885-P-02-24. Councillor Pickering has a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to Cam, I just got one question that's still puzzling me. I know there was no buildings at the time on the west end of Coaldale. My question is, looking at what he was saying, if he wouldn't have chose that location, basically council would have turned him down. Because there's no other, where I'm looking at it, there's no other way he would have been able to open that retail store anywhere, even though the liquor, because we're kind of looking at giving, like he says, Broadway, where he got told no. And that's one troubling question I have. And I think our Mayor, Mr. Van Rijn, I think we should table this so we have time to digest this. Because it's kind of troubling me that we're told one business where he could go, and then we're saying to these guys it's wide open.
if I may, so this is a difficult topic. So we worked with Mr. Bennett in attempting to find a location that we thought would be most suitable given the climate at the time. So to understand that statement, there were no locations in town that required no waivers whatsoever. So we understood that. We understood he was going to have to come to council with an application for a location that was going to have to require some sort of waiver. So there was the opportunity to go in the former 3G restaurant, which is where he located. There was also the space that still sits vacant next to the optometrist on Main Street. Other than that, commercial opportunities were relatively limited in town. Could have potentially built something on the west end of town at that time, though that would have, in my opinion, at the time been more difficult for him to receive approval for. And this comes back to the question Councillor Chapman raised about precedent. So there is no set precedent here. There is no sort of potential violation of a precedent. At the time that regulations were passed in 2018, the general, from my perspective, and so I don't want to put words into council's mouth, but my perspective as council's administrative representative was that the feelings towards the cannabis retail sales industry within the council makeup at the time were somewhere between openly opposed on sort of a moral basis, which is perfectly fine, to sort of accepting but cautious with respect to an industry that was very new and not knowing how it would impact the community. So given that legalization was fresh, not perfectly fresh because this was 2021. It was 2.5 years, I believe, after the rules were put in place, but certainly fresh for our community. The advice was to seek a location that would minimize some of the impacts of, say, for example, being highly visible or being along a route that children would have been walking on, for example. So that's where the discussion of, well, what's better, 301 meters away from a school, but along a path that people are walking to school versus 200 meters from a school, but hidden around a corner, tucked into a one-way street, right? And so that's where the logic was. This was probably the location that most likely would, if a location was going to be approved, this was the location that had the best chance of success, given the rules that existed, plus given the attitudes that we understood existed within the council of the day. So that would have been our advice on that matter. But that being said, there are new members of this council that don't necessarily have the same attitudes towards this business as previous members of council. And it is certainly your purview as new councillors to reject a philosophy that a previous councillor would hold in favor of your own personal philosophy. So it's a difficult thing. I recognize it does put Mr. Bennett in a difficult position. I certainly listen to his concerns and largely agree with them. However, the process that we have before us allows for the consideration of every new issue within the framework that we have before us. There was another statement made about sort of a 5-year concept that I can provide some clarity there. So the discussion that we would have had with Mr. Bennett was with respect to the regulations themselves, given that these regulations were quite restrictive compared to various communities. And so the conversation I would have had with Mr. Bennett at the time, as well as other potential applicants, was to say, with the adoption of the regulations, which would have been October of 2018, as someone working in the planning department, I wasn't forecasting coming back to council with sort of a look at changing those substantial changes to those regulations within a 5-year period, recognizing that realistically we would wait until the end of a council term and then give a new council time to get their feet under them before we would really sort of push for that consideration, if at all. That 5-year period would fundamentally bring us to about right now. So that's about where we are in that process.
Councillor Beekman has a question.
Thank you. I'm just going to start with this one. So correct me if I'm wrong, but this is only coming to council for a decision because of the liquor store setback?
Thank you. No, even if an application did not require any waivers, rezoning is required in order, because there is no existing zoning that allows for cannabis retail stores.
Okay.
Only direct control does. So even if it was 1,000 meters from all of these uses, we'd still come to council. And council could still decide for some other reason that, well, it's fine that it doesn't need a waiver from any of these restrictions, but I don't like this location for one reason or another. So it's still, because this is a little funny because it's the direct control district, the regulations, so to speak, about the setback requirements are guidelines for our consideration rather, because council can make any decision they want. That's the nature of a council. Every decision that comes before council is simply a decision of council rather than sort of staff who have to follow those rules, if that makes sense.
You do, thank you. And just kind of a statement, I guess, to follow up there, because the word's been said a few times by Councillor Chapman and yourself. If we're talking about precedent, we also have to look at precedent broad spectrum, I think, and we've been continually saying that we're open for business, and do we want to start putting an asterisk towards that or not? So, thank you.
Thank you. And further to your comment, if someone came to go see Cam, and Cam can speak to this as well, and they wanted to have a zoning change from urban reserve to commercial 1 or 2 because they want to put in a liquor store, they would have to come here to present at the public hearing. Not about the liquor store, but Cameron will do his presentation, and the liquor store applicant would have an opportunity to speak. So then, when I was listening to the conversation with Mr. Bennett, there would be an opportunity at that time for other liquor store owners to come and do exactly the same thing that that it's going to hurt our business if we allow another liquor store into Coldale because we already have 4 of them. The same thing goes for pizza restaurants in Coldale. Like we've had that discussion so many times about how many can we support in Coldale. So I'll open it up for council. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to the council, I don't know, I like the idea that any business should be allowed to come to Coldale, but based on some of the emails that we've received from residents, and even just the ones we received today when we got here, some of the residents seem a little bit disappointed in the location, the possible location of this cannabis store. So I, like Councillor Pickering, also believe that maybe tabling it to put some more thought into it would be a wise decision. So I think I would like to make that motion.
Go ahead, Cameron.
So I just want to make sure that tabling it is obviously a perfectly reasonable thing to do. It gives us, 3 weeks, for example, to consider the matter. What is important to consider, though, is that the public hearing the public hearing itself is closed, and so if council does choose to table the motion to consider it over a 3-week period, council is also obligated not to speak to the public about the issue. So you can't table it and then go, say, reach out to the people who wrote letters or talk to other people in the public. The 3-week period would be a time for yourself to reflect on the matter and the materials that you've been presented to make a decision. Yeah.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And first of all, I want to thank Cameron for the work that you've done on this overarching point. First of all, thank you again for the surveys you've done over the years. I think in reflection of the federal legislation that came through, the follow-up for communities like Coldale to adjust themselves accordingly, to find out for ourselves what's relevant, what's not relevant, what can we deny, what can we reject, what do we have to accept, became very clear in some of the surveys. And I think the one survey indicated obviously that downtown was the appropriate location for a venue of this sort. So I think that the council of the past listened to that quite carefully as a location. The second part to that downtown location was an appeal by the proprietors, owners of the business there, to change course and to formulate a lease with this business to allow themselves some opportunity to review their life and to look at other avenues, and in the meantime still be able to get revenue from a lease agreement with Chase Bennett. The other point that I want to point out with council is at that time when we were when council was reviewing what the logistics for this for their land use bylaw as well as for the direct control portion of it was a component of that. AHS was quite clear in terms of their indications of concerns over not only just the product itself, but locations were really under a large concern to them. So just to give full circle to where we are at tonight, I feel for myself that we've received some new information, both from the applicant and from the defendant, existing proprietor, about what we're seeing here tonight, and so I'd be supportive of tabling this till we till we get some more information. If not, I'm prepared to also make a decision tonight too.
Councillor Abrey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just unclear of what tabling it for 3 weeks is going to do, how that's going to change our decision. You know, the information that was given to us tonight was, as Mr. Mills said, can't be discussed. And I'll guarantee somebody in the community is going to approach one of us in the next 3 weeks and try and garner some more information on where we sit on this. And so can everybody around this table guarantee they will not engage in conversation for the next 3 weeks? Or is this going to be a vote in 3 weeks that was swayed afterwards from conversation we've had with the community?
Thank you, Councillor Abrey. And further to that, the reason I brought up the tabling motion was going to be based on the discussion around this council table. And I go back to another contentious topic was the VLTs, where we had a public hearing and we had 60, 70 people there, and it got quite vocal. And then instead of the discussion being tabled so everybody had an opportunity to digest what happened, and for anybody that watched that when that happened, it got pretty bad. So I'm just trying to avoid that, and that's why I threw that out. I agree with what Cameron Mills, and I appreciate you making that comment, and I agree with Councillor Abrey as well. But there is a motion on the floor by Councillor Reese. She can rescind it, or we can vote on it and then see where that takes us. Councillor Reese, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I would actually like to rescind that.
Thank you. So is there any more discussion on this topic, or is someone else care to make a motion? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I just want to bring to council's attention one point that I was just thinking about here. So in 2021, when they told him he could have his application in his store downtown, they were concerned about the children from John Davidson walking past this establishment. So now I'm going ahead to 2023, which this new school was started in 2022. We decided as council to put a low-level crossing where we're now going to funnel every child past that intersection. So as far as when they did it in 2021, using the excuse that John Davidson children would be walking by there, I think they overlooked this now. This is a point I'm bringing forward, that this is the only way that's going to get to that new high school. So if you're talking about children walking by, you were talking maybe 50 versus 500. So I just wanted to bring that to council's attention.
Thank you. And I'll just speak on that comment as well, and that came up earlier as well, is that we're here to make a decision. Council wasn't elected to be the moral police person for the community. So I appreciate your comment. And so moving forward now, Councillor Reese has rescinded her tabling motion. Does anybody care to sponsor second reading? Deputy Mayor Saylor, you have any comments on this subject? Just turn your microphone on, please.
I would just have to agree. I think there's other businesses in town, and I think if we were going to vote on if there was, say, a new gym, a new grocery store, you know, I just feel like we can't make our decision based off those type of things. We are open for business, like we said, and I don't think anybody would be batting an eye if there was an application for a new grocery store or something like that. So I just feel like that's not fair to other businesses as well, so we have to keep an open mind and vote accordingly.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? I'm looking for someone that would be willing to sponsor second reading. There is a motion on the floor by Councillor Beekman to sponsor second reading. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Second reading is defeated. Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7.2, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 886-P-02-24. First reading regarding rezoning urban reserve to urban to C2 and R2. Cameron Mills, Director of Growth and Investment, and our Deputy CAO will be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So we're this is in consideration of a bylaw to rezone lands in the east of Coaldale from urban reserve and utility to highway commercial C2 and residential multi-unit C2. So the town has received an application to rezone a portion of land lying within the northern portion of the Parkside Acres area structure plan from its existing UR zoning to highway commercial C2. So these are the lands located directly east of the RCMP station, as well as residential multi-unit R2. And these would be the lands also to the east of the thank you, Lana. Would also be to the east of the RCMP station, however, those lands further south. So that would be bordering the existing R2 designation zoning currently under construction on the eastern side of the Parkside Lake. The rezoning application is in line with the Parkside Acres area structure plan, which calls for both the C2, the commercial and higher density residential developments within these area. The area structure plan considers both low and higher density developments within the area called for R2 as being appropriate within that planning document, which would have been passed a little over 20 years ago. We note also that what's interesting about this is that the rezoning also includes a small area of land that's actually currently owned by the town. So shown as the sort of aqua-colored line running through what will ultimately be the commercial development proposed park. So that is a relatively narrow stretch of land that the town owns to accommodate, largely to accommodate stormwater management infrastructure. The understanding with the developer being that if the project is going to go through, they'll need to acquire this land from the town and provide in return an easement or some other type of thing that would allow for that infrastructure to remain in place. The town, following first reading, will schedule a public hearing for the bylaw. We'll circulate notice of said public hearing, gather public input, and we would look to have that public hearing at the next available meeting of council. This application, in order to move forward, will also require subdivision approval done in a separate process through the Municipal Planning Commission. Administration's recommendation on this matter is that first reading be provided and allow us to proceed forward with the public hearing and the gathering of feedback.
Thank you, Cameron. I'll open it up for members of council. Any questions, comments for our presenter? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Cam. On this drawing, I guess one question. Parkside Way goes down. Is it going to dead end there? Is that what the object is? So no through traffic?
Thank you. So yeah, as it stands, the Parkside, the intention is for Parkside Way to end in a cul-de-sac extending into the lot shown as R2. The area structure plan directly to the east has the provision for a road that will be built to a standard to connect 20th Avenue with 19A Avenue, but that'll be to the east, slightly to the east of these lands.
Thank you. That's all.
Councillor Abrey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to, for first reading of bylaw 886-P-02-24.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor by Councillor Abrey. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you. Actually, yes, just a question through to Cam. So I read through the staff report here and I couldn't find the info I was looking for. So acting on advice, I read through it 3 or 4 more times and still couldn't find the advice or the info I was looking for. Nowhere in there does it express anything of what the intended plan would be. Can you provide any insight to that, or is that not laid out yet? And the reason I ask is because if we're going to go to a public hearing, the public doesn't care about C2 and urban reserve. The public wants to know what the plan is, the final project. So if you can provide any insight to that.
I can. And I appreciate that. This is always the struggle we have with rezoning applications. So the rezoning process is not one where we approve specific uses. What we're considering is whether or not the highway commercial district is appropriate in this location and a higher density development is appropriate in this location. Once that's established, and once through the subdivision process, we have sort of plans for detailed design for road infrastructure and what have you, then the development permit process will allow us to consider the suitability of each potential use. So the C2 district has any number of uses which are approvable within it, as does the R2 district, and that's, we leave it open. And the reason that's important to do so is that, we have a landowner who owns it now who might come to council and might talk to you about very specific plans they have for the location. They may not build those plans. They may then sell the land to someone else. Well, that land has a zoning in place and people are allowed to do whatever they want with that land, regardless of what the last person said their intentions were. And so we always have this struggle. Someone says, well, I want to open a accounting office, and then the next guy wants to open a nightclub, right? And so those are largely very different. So we have some understanding of what the intention is. I believe it's something that the community will be very excited about, but we wouldn't speak to it because that's not appropriate for a rezoning.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? So there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Abrey that council approve first reading of land use bylaw amendment 886-P-0224 and set a public hearing for 5:05 p.m. on April 2nd, 2024 at a regular council meeting. Can I tweak your motion just a little bit? Perfect. Any further discussion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to council and committee reports. Agenda item 10.1, Emergency Advisory Committee. We have a verbal update from Councillor Rees. Whenever you're ready, Councillor Rees.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Good evening, Council. So like Mayor just said, my report is on the Emergency Advisory Committee. So the first update I'm going to give you guys is about the Regional Emergency Management Program. As Council will recall, in June 2023, when I presented my EAC report, part of the information that I shared was that Pitcher Butte had submitted and received the Regional Emergency Program grant for $200,000 to build a sustainable emergency program by the end of 2024. This regional program includes 6 municipalities, and those are the Village of Barons, Coaldale, Colehurst, Lethbridge County, Nobleford, and Pitcher Butte. Since then, the request for proposal has been awarded to Trace Associates, and they're working on the following: drafting a regional management agreement that sets the foundation for each municipality's participation, creating bylaws for each community to implement, supporting the creation, compiling information and assisting with municipalities in submitting documentation to seek the ministerial order for this regional program. They are evaluating and creating a draft budget that can be presented to all involved municipalities to implement this regional emergency program. They are completing a comprehensive hazard identification risk assessment, also known as the HIRA, and that involves all partnering communities and drives the emergency planning process. And then based on the HIRA, they will be drafting another municipal emergency plan that meets the needs of all the regional partners and complies with the Local Authority Emergency Management Regulation Act. They will be developing and conducting tabletop, functional, and full-scale exercises to test the plan that has been built. And based on the feedback, they will be improving the municipal emergency plan. They will be conducting initial incident management team training with key personnel to ensure the ability and implement the emergency management plan. And lastly, they will be conducting ICS training for up to the 300 level to ensure teams are functional before implementation of the plan. And so that's the update on the regional emergency plan as it stands. Going forward on the agenda, the next thing is Emergency Preparedness Week. This year will fall on May 5th to 11th. The theme is still unknown at this time. However, they do plan on presenting presentations to the senior center and schools throughout Emergency Preparedness Week this year. That's the first, which is pretty cool. And part of Emergency Preparedness Week will once again have Disasters Corner, with intentions on having more presentations on fire safety and businesses and activities available. And next on the agenda is, in preparation for the Summer Games, Chief Rutberg will be leading 3 tabletop exercises for emergency personnel and town staff alike. Council is invited to observe for their own knowledge and familiarization on the process. There's no set dates just yet, but they will be in April and May, and I will email council once I have a confirmation of the dates. So hoping that some members of council will go to these tabletop functions. It's very important, I believe, that we show our support in that as well. So there's also ICS 300 on March 18th to the 20th, which I will be taking part in as well. That will be the last of my RCS training. And just a little piece of information that I found kind of interesting is there are 52 fires still burning from last year. And of those, 5 have started up again. So it just goes as a reminder that it's fire season again, and it's time to get the word out there about fire safety. And that concludes my report. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Reese. Are there any questions for Councillor? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Councillor Reith. Thank you so much for your report, and very enlightening. May 5th through 11th is Emergency Preparedness Week.
Yep.
And you had mentioned there'll be presentations to schools and seniors.
Yep.
I completely support that, and of course our seniors are important. Is that the same week as Seniors Week that we proclaim, or is that a late June 5th? So it won't line up. But if there's anything else we can do and ensure that even FCSS gets that messaging out to our seniors as well.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Councillor Reese, would you care to make a motion to receive the Emergency Advisory Committee update as information?
Yes, I would.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to information items, 12.0. First one is 12.1, Mayors and Reeves of Southwest Alberta. the meeting minutes from February the 4th, 2024. Are there any questions, comments about those minutes? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion that council receive the Mayors and Reeves February 4th, 2024 meeting minutes as information? Deputy Mayor Saylor does that. Is there anybody opposed to that? Motion is carried. The agenda item 12.2 Subdivision and Development Appeal Board meeting minutes from February 27th, 2024. Any questions or comments on that one? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick comment that I appreciate seeing these minutes in our agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Beekman, do you care to move the minutes from the SDAB February 27, 2024 meeting minutes as information? Is there anybody opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. Agenda item 12.3, the Handy Ride meeting minutes, January 9th, 2024. Any questions, comments on that one? Councillor Chapman makes a motion to receive the Handy Ride January 9th, 2024 meeting minutes as information. Is there anybody opposed to that? Thank you. Carried unanimously. So that takes us to the end of the open portion. I'll be needing a motion that council move into closed session in accordance with section 197-4-B of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for items 13.1, subject to section 16, business interests of a third party, and section 17, personal privacy, and section 25, economic and other interests of a public body. Who cares to make that motion? Deputy Mayor Saylor? Is there anybody opposed to that? That's carried. We shall take a 10-minute break.